My dear, I want to tell you about Sandra. But before I do, I should tell you a little about myself and about Frank, and about what my life looked like before Sandra ever walked through my door, because I think it matters for understanding why I responded to her the way I did. My name is Joan, and I am 81 years old. My husband Frank passed away 11 years ago, a long illness, the kind that gives you time to say everything you need to say, which I suppose is its own small mercy, though it doesn't feel like one at the time. After Frank died, my daughter Lynn, who lives nearly 3 hours away with a busy job and 3 children of her own, would have had me move closer to her. But I couldn't bear to leave the bungalow Frank and I had bought together on the edge of a quiet village, with his vegetable patch still out the back and his shed still smelling faintly of creosote and pipe tobacco. Even now, all these years later, so I stayed. We speak on the phone every Sunday, Lynn and I, and she visits when she can, but the day-to-day reality of my life is mostly my own to manage. For the first 8 years after Frank died, I managed it perfectly well, my dear. I'm stubborn, you see. Frank always said so, fondly mostly, and I rather liked proving I could cope alone. 3 years ago, that changed. I fell in the garden, nothing dramatic, just a wet patch by the back step that I'd walked over 1,000 times before, except that particular morning my foot caught wrong, and I went down hard and fractured my wrist. Lynn drove 3 hours that same afternoon, sat with me at the hospital, and on the drive home, very gently, she said, "Mum, I think it might be time to have a bit of help. Just someone to come in a few mornings a week, not because you can't manage, but because I'd worry less." I agreed, mostly to put her mind at ease, and the council arranged for an agency to send someone round. Over the first few months, several different carers came and went, pleasant enough, most of them, but none of them stayed long, the way it often goes with agency work. I understand, lots of turnover, lots of new faces learning your routines and then disappearing again just as you'd got used to them. And then, about 2 years and 8 months before the events I'm about to tell you, Sandra arrived. Sandra was, I would guess, in her late 30s. She had 2 children of her own. I learned quite early on, a boy of 12 and a girl of 9. And she worked nearly 60 hours a week between 2 different care jobs to support them, after their father had left some years before, moving up north for work, and from what I gathered over time, sending money only sporadically, when it suited him. From the very first morning, there was something different about Sandra. She had a warmth that didn't feel like part of the job, though I want to be fair to the other carers, too. Most of them had been perfectly kind, just professionally kind, if that makes sense, my dear. The kind of kindness that clocks in and clocks out. Sandra's was different. She remembered things. She remembered that I took my tea with just a splash of milk, no sugar, after I'd mentioned it only once. She remembered that Tuesdays were difficult for me, because Tuesday was the day Frank used to take me for a drive along the coast in his old Rover, just the 2 of us, every week for nearly 40 years, and she would always find some small reason to make Tuesdays a little brighter. A different route to the shops, so we'd pass the coast road, even just for a moment. A funny story about her own children. Once, she brought me a small bunch of flowers from her own garden, just because, she said, a little embarrassed by the gesture, as though she worried it might seem presumptuous. Over 2.5 years, Sandra became in many ways the closest person to me in my daily life. More than a carer, closer to family, in the way that the people who show up for the ordinary, unglamorous parts of your life often become family, regardless of blood. I knew about her children's school plays, her struggles with an unreliable old Fiesta that seemed to break down with almost comic regularity, her worry about an upcoming dental bill for her son that she genuinely didn't know how she'd afford. And she knew, I think, almost everything about me, my routines, my finances in a general sense, where I kept things, the rhythms of my small life. I want to be honest with you, my dear, and say that for most of those 2.5 years, I had absolutely no idea anything was wrong. None at all. Sandra was, in every way that mattered to me, simply Sandra, kind, reliable, present, the person who got me through the anniversaries of Frank's death each year with cups of tea and gentle distraction, and once, a slightly tipsy toast to absent husbands that made us both laugh and cry at the same time. I remember, in particular, the second Christmas Sandra worked for me. My own children couldn't make it that year. Lynn had a stomach bug going round her whole house, and Patricia, my other daughter, was in Canada as always, and I told everyone quite firmly that I'd be perfectly fine on my own, that I'd had 80 Christmases and one quiet one wouldn't kill me. Sandra wasn't due to work that day at all. Agency carers don't, usually not on Christmas Day, and quite right too, they have their own families. But she turned up anyway, mid-morning, with her 2 children in tow, carrying a small chicken she'd cooked extra of at home, just in case you hadn't bothered with anything proper, Joan, which I'd put money on you not having. She was right, of course. I'd been planning to have toast and call it festive. We ended up spending the whole afternoon together, the four of us, her children playing some elaborate game with my old set of dominoes that Frank and I used to play, and Sandra and I sat by the window with our tea watching them, and she said quite quietly, "My mum's on her own today too, you know. I feel bad about that." And I said, "Why aren't you with her then, love?" And Sandra said something I didn't think much of at the time. "It's complicated, Joan. Long story." And we left it there, and the afternoon carried on, warm and easy, and I genuinely thought, watching her, that I had never met a kinder person in my life. I still think that, my dear, even now, even knowing everything I came to know later. That's important to understand before I tell you the rest. The first person to notice anything, my dear, wasn't me. It was Lynn. It started small, the way these things do. About 18 months into Sandra's visits, Lynn mentioned, during one of our Sunday calls, that she'd noticed a new direct debit on my bank statement. She'd set up online access for me the previous year, mostly so she could help me keep an eye on things from a distance, since my eyesight makes the small print difficult. "Mum, do you know what this is? £9.99 a month. It's been going out for a few months now, some kind of streaming subscription by the name of it." I didn't know what it was. I told Lynn I'd ask Sandra about it. Perhaps it was something she'd helped me set up and I'd simply forgotten, my memory not always being what it once was. Lynn agreed that was probably it, and we didn't think much more about it that time. Then, a few months later, my neighbour Pamela, who I've known for over 20 years, and who pops round most weeks for a cup of tea, mentioned something, almost in passing, while we were sitting in my front room. "Joan, love, where's your little porcelain bird gone? The one on the windowsill with the blue wing. I always admired that one." I looked at the windowsill, and Pamela was right, the bird wasn't there. I genuinely couldn't remember when I'd last seen it. "I expect it got broken during cleaning, and I've forgotten," I said, and Pamela nodded, the way you do about small things, and we moved on to talking about something else. But Pamela, my dear, and I'm grateful to her for this, though at the time I brushed it off, mentioned it again, a few weeks later, to Lynn on the phone, the two of them having become friendly over the years, through their shared concern for me. "I don't want to make a fuss," Pamela said to Lynn, "but there's been a couple of little things gone missing from Joan's, and I just wondered. Well, I don't like to say it, but Joan's carer is the only other person who's regularly in the house, isn't she?" Lynn didn't say anything to me about this conversation at the time. She told me about it afterward, and explained that she hadn't wanted to worry me or accuse Sandra of anything, on the basis of one missing ornament that could easily have been broken and thrown away. But she did quietly start paying closer attention to my bank statements. The real discovery, the full discovery, happened almost by accident, on an ordinary Thursday morning about 2 months after Pamela's comment. Lynn called slightly earlier than usual, and asked me to look at something with her on the little tablet she'd given me. "Mum, I want to go through the last 2 years properly, not just the last few months. Can we do that together now?" We sat on the phone for nearly an hour, my dear, scrolling back through statement after statement, month after month, with Lynn reading out each line and asking, "Do you remember this one, Mum? And this one?" Most of it I remembered: the ordinary business of living, groceries, the television license, the heating. But there was a pattern underneath it, spread across nearly 2 years, that I hadn't seen because I'd never had a reason to look for it, and because each individual piece on its own was small enough to mean nothing. Cash withdrawals from my account on days I knew I hadn't been to the bank, because Sandra had taken me on her way to the shops for me, and I'd given her my card and my PIN years ago, for convenience, the way you do when you trust someone completely. The streaming subscription, going out faithfully every month for 18 months. 2 payments to an online clothing website, for amounts that, while not enormous individually, £40 here, £60 there, added up over time to something that was no longer small at all. Added together over nearly 2 years, it came to just over £1,100. Lynn, understandably, was furious and frightened for me, in the way children become frightened for elderly parents when they realise something has been happening that they couldn't protect against. "Mum, you need to call the agency right now. This is theft. This is a crime and it needs to be reported." And she was right, of course, it was theft. But I want to tell you, my dear, what I actually did, and I want you to understand that it wasn't because I'm a pushover or because I didn't take it seriously. It was because of something I noticed, sitting there with the statement in front of me that I couldn't quite let go of, and because of a phone call I made that evening. Before I did anything else, I rang Pamela. "Pamela," I said, "you mentioned the bird going missing a while back. Do you remember roughly when that was?" Pamela thought about it and gave me a rough date, about 18 months earlier. I checked it against the statement Lynn and I had gone through. It was the same month the streaming subscription started. I sat with that for a long time after I put the phone down. 18 months. I tried to remember what had been happening around then in Sandra's life, and slowly, piece by piece, it came back to me. 18 months ago was around the time Sandra's old Fiesta had finally, properly died, not just broken down, but actually died beyond repair, according to the garage. I remembered her telling me about it, sitting at my kitchen table, looking exhausted in a way I hadn't quite registered properly at the time, saying something like, "I don't know what I'm going to do, Joan. Without the car I can't get to either job, and without either job, well." She'd laughed it off, the way she did, made a joke about walking everywhere like the old days, and we'd moved on to talking about something else. I asked my daughter to give me a day before doing anything. That evening, when Sandra arrived for her usual visit, she came most evenings too by then, just to check on me and help with dinner, though strictly her contracted hours had ended at lunchtime years ago. I made us both a cup of tea, as I always did, and I simply put the printed bank statement on the kitchen table between us, the relevant lines highlighted in yellow by Lynn. I did not shout. I did not accuse. I simply said, "Sandra, love, I need you to help me understand something." What happened next, my dear, I will remember for the rest of my life. Sandra looked at the statement for a long moment, and then her whole face, seemed to collapse. Not into anger or defensiveness, but into something I can only describe as relief, the terrible relief of someone who has been carrying something heavy and exhausting for a very long time, and has just been allowed, finally, to put it down. She didn't deny anything. She told me through tears in halting pieces about the car, exactly as I'd suspected. The repairs would have cost more than the car was worth, and a replacement, even a terrible old banger, was money she simply didn't have, not without missing rent, and missing rent meant a black mark that would follow her for years with landlords. And without a car she couldn't get to either job. And without either job, I told myself it was just until I sorted the car out, she said. Just a bit here and there that you wouldn't notice, Joan, and I'd pay it back somehow. I really believed that. I want you to know I really believed that. And then the car got sorted. A friend of a friend sold me one cheap, but by then I don't know. It had stopped feeling like an emergency and started feeling like just how things were now. A horrible little arrangement I'd made with myself. And every single time I told myself it was the last time, and I never quite believed it, and I never quite stopped either. The bird, she put her face in her hands. I sold the bird for £8, Joan. £8. I think about that more than anything else. £8 for something that meant something to you, and I didn't even think about that until I'd already done it. My dear, I sat with that for a long moment. And here is what I felt, not nothing, certainly. There was a sting to it, a real one. And the bird, I confess, stung more than the money somehow, though I couldn't entirely explain why, even to myself. The trust between us had a crack in it now that would never fully disappear, and I think we both knew that. But underneath the sting there was something else. I understood with absolute clarity that Sandra was not a thief in the way the word usually means. She was a mother, exhausted and frightened, who had made a series of small, terrible choices, each one slightly easier than the last, in a situation that nobody, not me, not the agency, not anyone, had ever noticed she was drowning in. I made a decision that evening, and I want to tell you honestly, my daughter did not agree with it, not at first. I did not call the agency. I did not call the police. Instead, I told Sandra this: I need you to pay back what you took. Not all at once, I know you don't have it. A little each month, however much you can manage, for as long as it takes. And I need you to tell me honestly when things are difficult, not steal from me, but tell me. Because Sandra, if you told me about the car, I would have helped you. I would have wanted to help you. That's what made this so painful, not that you needed help, but that you didn't feel you could ask for it. Sandra cried for a long time that evening, properly cried. The way you cry when something that's been wound too tight for too long finally gives way. She has paid back slowly, almost all of what was taken. A little each month, exactly as we agreed, and she has never missed a payment, not once, even when I've told her not to worry about it for a month, which I've done more than once when I knew things were tight for her. My daughter eventually came to understand my decision, though it took her longer than it took me. And I think, if I'm honest, it took a conversation she had with Sandra directly, about 6 months after that evening, that really settled it for her. What Lynn hadn't known, and what I learned only a little later myself, was about Sandra's mother. Sandra's mother, it turned out, lived alone too, about an hour's drive away, in a small flat, in not entirely dissimilar circumstances to my own, except that Sandra's mother had nobody at all visiting her regularly. No carer, because the family couldn't afford one privately and she didn't qualify for council-funded care under the rules where she lived. No Pamela next door. No Lynn ringing every Sunday. Just Sandra, exhausted from working 60 hours a week, trying to get over to see her own mother whenever she possibly could, which, by her own admission, wasn't often enough, and feeling guilty about that on top of everything else, and the complicated long story from that Christmas afternoon, my dear. It turned out to be simpler and sadder than I'd imagined. Sandra and her mother had fallen out years before over money, ironically enough, given everything, a loan Sandra's brother had never repaid, and an argument about it that had said things neither of them had quite been able to take back afterward. They'd patched it up mostly by the time I knew Sandra, but the rhythm of visiting had never quite recovered, the way these things sometimes don't, even after the original argument is long forgiven. Sandra told Lynn that Christmas Day had been the first time in 2 years she'd properly thought about how alone her mother actually was, not because of the argument anymore, but just because life had got busy, and busy has a way of becoming permanent if nobody interrupts it. One Sunday, about 6 months after the conversation at my kitchen table, Lynn happened to be visiting when Sandra arrived, and the two of them ended up properly talking, the way Sandra and I had talked for 2.5 years, and Sandra, I think mostly out of a need to explain herself fully to someone who'd been so angry on my behalf, told Lynn about her mother too. Lynn came and found me in the kitchen afterward, and she said quietly, "Mum, I think I understand now. Not that it makes it right, but I understand. And here, my dear, is the part of this story that I think about most, even now." A few weeks after that conversation, I asked Sandra, tentatively, because I wasn't sure how she'd take it, whether her mother might like a visitor sometimes. Not instead of Sandra visiting, but in addition. "I have a car, my dear, even at 81, a little automatic that Frank insisted I learn to drive properly, even though for years he did all the driving himself, just in case. He always said, and how right he was in ways neither of us could have predicted. I visit Sandra's mother now once a fortnight. Her name is Brenda, and she's 79, and she makes the worst cup of tea I have ever tasted in my life, far too strong, practically furred with tea leaves, and I drink every drop of it every single time, because Brenda, like me, like all of us, simply wants someone to sit with her for an hour and ask her something real. Sandra still comes to see me, my dear, 3 years on now from when all this began. Things between us are different than they were before, quieter, perhaps more honest in a way that took a painful event to find. But she is still, in many ways, the closest person to me in my daily life, and now, in a strange roundabout way through her, I have Brenda too, and Brenda has me, and between the two of us, I think, Sandra worries a little less than she used to about the people she loves being alone. Now, I don't tell you this story to suggest that theft should always be forgiven, or that everyone who steals from an elderly person deserves a second chance. I know that isn't always true, and I know some situations are far more serious than mine was, involving people who show no remorse at all, who would do it again the moment your back was turned. I'm not naive about that, my dear, even at 81, but I tell you this story because I think, as we get older, we sometimes forget that the people who care for us are carrying their own burdens, often invisibly, often silently, and sometimes those burdens crack in ways that have nothing to do with how much they care about us. And sometimes, if you're patient, and if you're willing to ask one more question than seems strictly necessary, those cracks lead you somewhere you never expected. In my case, they led me to Brenda, and her terrible tea, and a Tuesday fortnightly visit that I now look forward to almost as much as I once looked forward to Frank's coastal drives. If someone in your life has disappointed you recently, my dear, before you decide what kind of person they are, it might be worth asking what kind of week or month or year they've been quietly having, and who else might be standing just behind them in the shadows, carrying something too. You might be surprised by what you find, and you might find, as I did, that the right response isn't always the one that feels most justified in the moment, but the one that actually helps, and that sometimes ripples outward in ways you'd never have planned for. Good night, my dears.